Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Greetings. Welcome to the Boner Show. Interesting news here about Google. They have decided to create essentially a parent company that Google will fall under. The name of that company is Alphabet. And so Alphabet will be the parent company of Google and all those other companies that Google has acquired, which will, I guess, be operated independently under this parent company. And so I guess what are some of those companies? Life Sciences, Calico, XLab, Nest, Fiber, all of these other things will fall under Alphabet. And they chose the name Alphabet because, well, I guess Larry Page, his explanation is right here. We like the name Alphabet because it means a collection of letters that represent language, one of humanity's most important innovations, and is the core of how we index with Google search. We also like that it means alpha bet. Alpha is investment return above benchmark, which we strive for. So what are your thoughts on this move? Why did they make this move? And what does it all mean?
Well, I'm sure that there are sort of legal reasons that are way above our knowledge as to why it makes more sense to have the companies that Google has purchased sort of be subsidiary companies of some broader umbrella company than direct subsidiaries of Google. We could speculate. There are probably a ton of reasons why that makes sense. As far as the name choice, I think it's kind of cool. It's a good idea. It was confusing when the news first broke, where people were posting on Facebook that Google has now created an alphabet. And obviously that's not at all what the story was.
Yes. So there is a new CEO of Google, and I don't remember the name of the guy, but that's that. So Larry Page and what's the other guy's name?
Sergey Brin. Yeah.
Yes. They will be the heads of Alphabet. And, I think a lot of this probably has to do with legal protection, but perhaps at this point, because Google did buy so many companies, it just makes sense to do this.
And maybe it's a branding thing also, because Google has started to buy so many companies that a lot of them, it's harder and harder to see how it relates directly to what it is Google does. So maybe it does make more sense to say, well, the company is Alphabet. One of the things we do is Google, and then here's all this other stuff that we do.
Yeah, that is true. And so that's that. Google, perhaps the most powerful company on the planet now is Alphabet. And it's called Alphabet, and it doesn't sound like the company, your evil overlord company.
No, it sounds quite friendly.
It does sound quite friendly, but that's not going to stop people from worrying about Alphabet taking over the world.
Right.
And so, Alphabet, Skynet. What's the difference?
We need something cool like that for our network name.
You mean like Skynet? Alphabet's not that cool.
Well,
right?
I think it's a good concept. I mean, it's just so, how could anyone be offended by an alphabet?
But when our name is supposed to be like something related to a network or
right.
a collection of shows, I don't think you can have just one word like that. I mean, if we could, certainly our options have just expanded quite a bit. But would you consider that?
Yeah. What if we just named the entire network could just be called Chemistry?
Chemistry. It's
just
a little
it's
misleading.
Just a word,
A little misleading, though. But, okay, so I guess we'll entertain ideas. Okay, but what about Google? What if it's not a real word? Can we do that?
Yeah, we could. I don't know if there's an advantage to it, though, until you build. I think there's probably not an advantage to doing that because it takes a long time to build a sort of non-word as a thing that people are aware of.
Yes, unless it's a word that people find, I don't know, really funny, or it rolls off the tongue really well, or something like that. Anyway, if you have ideas for network names that aren't traditional, perhaps one word, perhaps two words that have nothing to do with programming, let us know.
Oh boy, something's up with your connection, Lewis. I don't know what's going on.
Uh-oh. Is it still bad? Has it resolved?
It's slightly better.
I don't know. I don't know what that was. If it happens again, let me know immediately, please. Someone has built a $32 device. Well, a device made from $32 worth of electronics that can intercept.
Oh boy, yeah, Lewis, you're cutting out again. I don't know what's going on.
Well, this is quite strange.
Are you watching Netflix while you do the bonus show? Is that what's causing it?
I've got windows open, and there's really no reason for this to be happening, unless there's someone else in the house who has started doing something sinister. Is it still outrageous?
It's okay. We can try to. Please proceed, Governor.
If you want, I could leave the room and try to figure out what's there.
Yeah, I would say let's do that because I'll entertain the audience while you do that, and I'll explain. Actually, this is a good time for me to explain. Yeah, you go ahead, Lewis. I'll don't worry. I'll handle this for now. I've been getting questions about what is going on with the studio in Boston and sort of what's going on interim-wise. And obviously, Lewis and I are still not in the same location. The studio search is coming along quite well, and we are down to just a few final options. In fact, I was in Boston last week and we'll be going back this week, and we're really narrowing down. But for the time being, Lewis has temporarily set up the studio in the house he grew up in Northampton, Massachusetts. His parents have been nice enough to allow him back in to the house he hasn't lived in for very, very long for studio space for the time being. Of course, the downside is that different people are often in the house and using the internet. So that's what Lewis, I believe, is exploring now. And now that he's back, Lewis, were you able to uncover anything?
Oh yes, someone started browsing the web. Someone forgot that I was producing a show here.
All right, Lewis. Let's. So I'm really interested in this $32 hacked tool.
Sammy Kamkar is someone who is well known for cracking master combination locks. Built this device, and like I said, it's very cheap and it can steal wireless codes to open car doors and garages. It's just amazing what some of these people can do with knowledge of electronics and cheap parts probably built in China. Now, I'm not sure as to the legality of selling a device like this, but this device has been tested with Ford, Toyota, Volkswagen, Chrysler, Nissan, and Lotus, as well as aftermarket security systems from Cobra and Viper, and they are all vulnerable to the attack. Cadillacs, newer Cadillacs, are not, because the codes generated by their fobs time out after a short while. I guess it's a more secure system.
For me, the big risk here isn't really getting into the car, because you can build this thing for $32 to unlock the car door. But then what? I guess you could steal stuff from the car. But if you want to steal the car itself, you still have to know how to get the car started without keys, which of course is doable. But it's a totally different thing than just making this $32 device. The real thing for me is getting into a garage, right? Because often the door between people's garage and home is left unlocked all the time with the idea that, hey, nobody's going to get in the garage in the first place. And that's really how you could end up losing big.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's just kind of interesting that people are doing this, you know. And of course, we're always discussing autonomous cars and how vulnerable will they be to these types of attacks. So anyway, Dave, you've told that story about how your garage was broken into a long time ago.
Yeah, when I was in, I think I was a freshman in college. I was still living at home, or it might have even been the summer. No, I think it was the summer after senior year before college. And it's about 7:15 in the morning, and my mom comes in and wakes me up, and she says, "Listen, I don't want to alarm you, but did you remove all of the wheels from your car last night?" Which, of course, it alarmed me, as you can imagine, Lewis. And I ran out, and indeed, someone had gotten into the garage. But we have no reason to think it was through the garage, through the big garage door that the car goes through. Every indication was the side door, which is just a regular door. You could probably get through that door with a credit card if you know what you're doing. The indication was that they went in that way, took the wheels and tires from the car, as well as my CD player that I had at the time.
Yep. Dave, the victim of theft, and it was quite an ordeal.
Yep.
But yes, I highly doubt that this was one of these types of devices at play here. Like Dave said, probably just the side door, and middle of the night, it's bing, bang, boom, done. David had no more wheels. Here's an interesting story. I find salamanders to be fascinating. All sorts of salamanders all over the world.
I find you finding them fascinating to be even more fascinating.
You have the giant salamanders in Japan that are like 6 feet long. And then you have these cave salamanders that are completely blind, have lost all pigment in their skin. And I find them to be fascinating creatures as well. And an example I like to point out when I'm talking to someone who doesn't believe in evolution, because I believe that these salamanders are one of the best examples of evolution that we can observe. You have them, losing their eyes after roughly 1,000 years in these cave systems, still having the eye sockets, still very much like the salamanders on the outside, losing their pigment, and now losing the parts of their brain that deal with vision. It's fascinating. But in this story, this is a little bit different. There is this endangered blind cave salamander that researchers have determined they can basically go at least a decade without food. There was one researcher who put one of these in his refrigerator, and after 10 years, it was still alive without any food. Now, I guess what happens is that these kind of cool off and kind of put themselves into a type of stasis where they are really using no calories at all, and they are able to do this. But they also found that after 50 years of study, researchers found 50-year-old salamanders who were still in great shape. And so this has led researchers to believe that perhaps these salamanders could live to be over 100 years old.
Now, when we say that they can go without food, isn't it possible that in the fridge there was stuff in the fridge that the salamander could be eating, even if it was very small amounts?
No, the salamander was in a container that did not really allow it to access anything that was in the fridge.
Ah.
Yeah. It was not freely roaming about the refrigerator.
Got it.
But pretty incredible. We've read stories about humans that have essentially done the same thing, not for 10 years, but there was the story of the guy who was, basically fell asleep in his car in the cold somewhere. Maybe it was in Scandinavia, way up north, and I think survived for a month without food or water by basically going into hibernation, if you will. Of course, 10 years is a little bit different. I don't think the guy would have survived 10 years.
I think you're right.
Because he barely survived that month. But fascinating, isn't it? I mean, can you imagine these little things living to be 100 and going a decade without eating anything?
It's incredible. And some of this science is being thought of for long space travel, right? How can we make it so that humans can get further, number one, by not going crazy from being stuck on a spacecraft for 10 years, going somewhere really far, and number two, to reduce the amount of food that we have to bring. Can we put humans into a sort of stasis? And usually it involves sort of like an induced hypothermia-like state, etc. It's actually a huge research area.
It is, yeah. It's fascinating. Could I just put myself to sleep on this planet, wake up in 100 years and see what's changed? That would be some incredible technology. I hope it happens in our lifetimes because I might like to utilize it.
Yeah, I was recently talking with someone about this, and we both eventually realized, unless everyone you know is doing the same thing, traveling forward in time or doing what you just suggested, it would be kind of lame because then you don't know anybody. You're completely alone, and you're probably somewhat disconnected from the societal norms as well. Like, it would be incredibly challenging.
It would be challenging. I'm thinking of Futurama now, but it would be challenging, and at the same time, I mean, how could you not? I mean, we are both very curious people. I mean, if this were offered to you, let's say you're 60 years old, this technology comes around, let's just say you're retired, and you have the option of going to sleep for 100 years, 200 years, I mean, you could wake up and we could be colonizing planets. We could, imagine.
There's elements of it that are they appeal to my curiosity, but imagine that you are 60 and you have, a couple of kids and maybe a grandchild or maybe grandchildren will be happening within the next 5 or 10 years. If you skip forward 200 years, you will completely have missed your grandchildren's entire lives, unless they also do the exact same thing, as I mentioned, right? If you only do this, and then I guess you could go and figure out who your great-great-great-great-great-grandkids are, but I don't know, you would lose a lot in a way that you can never undo.
Yeah, well, cryogenic businesses will have to offer bonuses if you do it with a friend.
Yeah.
Travel into the future with a buddy, save 10%.
Right.
Or just don't have kids, Dave. Now we're talking. But that's it for today. Great bonus show, Dave. Thank you for being here.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.